Hi everyone, Crista Cowan here with another episode of The Barefoot Genealogist. Today we begin a 4-part series about marriage records. Today we're going to just talk really basic for those of you who are new to Ancestry.com, or for those of you who may not be familiar with how to find marriage records on Ancestry.com. Then Thursday, and then both next Tuesday and Thursday, we're going to talk just kind of level by level about different ways to access marriage records, different information you're going to find in them, maybe some non-traditional records that will give you clues to marriages. Be sure to check out our schedule on our Facebook page. If you just go to facebook.com/ancestry.com/events, that's facebook.com/ancestry.com/events. That will give you the full list of topics for the next couple of weeks, and you can RSVP for those events that look like they might be beneficial to you. So today we're going to talk really basically about how to find marriage records on Ancestry.com. Whether you are a newbie or not, I imagine that you will probably find some benefit and maybe some tips and tricks that you weren't aware of as we go through what we're going to talk about today. So let's dive in. We're going to start with just some basic information. First of all, when talking about finding marriage records, the first thing that you need to be aware of is that records do not exist for all marriages. And there are a lot of reasons for that. Some of it has to do with the time period. So for example, marriages weren't always legally required to be recorded. And so certainly there won't be marriages recorded at a state level here in the United States until the early 1900s. Sometimes they won't be available civilly at all from any government organization. As you get back 100 years, 200 years, 300 years, sometimes those marriages were only recorded by churches, by religions, by various religious organizations. And so the time period makes a difference when you're looking for that marriage record. There are also various laws governing marriage. So for example, African Americans in this country in particular, especially enslaved African Americans, were not allowed to marry in certain times in certain places. And so they had local customs and traditions that married them, but certainly that was not a marriage, sadly, that was not a marriage that was recognized at the time. Also, record conditions. So a marriage may have been recorded, but that marriage record may no longer exist. So I don't tell you this to discourage you by any means, but just to kind of give you a realistic expectation. The more recent the record, the more readily available it should be. The further back you go, the more difficult it will be, but not impossible. Now, with that said, so not all records do not exist for all marriages, and not all marriage records that exist are available online. And there are a lot of reasons for this. Here in the United States, again, if we think about different states that record marriages, those marriage records, in some cases, didn't start until the early 1900s, and those states may have privacy laws around those marriage records that are 50 or 75 years, which means the state will hold those records and only release them to immediate family upon request in many cases, so they're not going to be available online. Outside of formal state privacy laws, there are also rules at various archives about what records can and can't be accessed. In some cases, I know I've been into archives where it's not that there are any privacy laws. There are records that are 200-300 years old, and they're just in such a deteriorating condition that they're trying to figure out how to preserve those records or how to digitize those records without destroying them. And so they don't want anybody to have access to them until they figure out how and if they can preserve them. So just because records exist doesn't mean they're available online. So hopefully if you can't find what you're looking for online, you will make the effort to call the courthouse or the archive in the county or the country in which you are interested in looking for that particular record. Also, and I'm just going to mention this briefly because I believe this is our topic for Thursday, be aware that some places, so some archives and repositories, have provided us with marriage records, but they've only provided us with the index. They want to maintain the original records. They do not want those put online. Sometimes it's a financial issue. The archive knows that if they give you the index, that gives you enough information to order a copy of the original record from them. Sometimes it is about this privacy concept. So it just depends. Every location is entirely different. And so let's just talk about how we access those. The third thing I want to talk about before we dive onto the website is, so records don't exist for all marriages. Not all marriage records that exist are available online. The third point I want to make is that not all records that exist online are going to show up as a shaky leaf hint. Now, I've talked about this before in various settings, but I just want to reiterate this, especially for those of you who are new. I just got asked this question again twice yesterday. Ancestry.com provides you with those little shaky leaf hints on your family tree that say, here are some records that we have found for your ancestor that we think might be for your ancestor. One of the things you need to understand is that we do not hint every single database in our collection. Ancestry.com has billions of records, and we have selected, if I remember correctly, it's like the top 10% of our databases to hint. It's to get you started. It's to get you excited about it. It's to get you moving in the right direction. You're still going to have to search. I think if I did a check, and according to my looking at it, there are only 2 marriage databases or 3 that actually hint. And so unless your family was from Pennsylvania or Massachusetts or California, I think, you're going to need to actually search the records that are available. So let's talk about how to do that, how to see what's available. When you are on Ancestry.com, hover over that search box and go down and click on the card catalog. If you're not familiar with the card catalog, I would strongly encourage you to spend some time with the card catalog just to get familiar with how it works. It works just like the card catalog in a library used to work when you were a kid. It tells you what's available. Then you have to go to that particular database or book and look at the index to determine what's in that database. So that's kind of how the card catalog works. You can see here we have 31,265 databases available on Ancestry.com, and every one of those databases in some cases has billions or millions of records available in that particular database. So when you do just a search, when you just click search, you're searching all of the records, and that's why you get so many search results. But if you're looking for something specific, the card catalog is a quick and easy way to come in and to see if A, the record you want exists online, and then B, to get directly to that database and search. So here's how I use the card catalog. There are filters over here on the left-hand side. Let me make this just a little bit bigger so that you can see here. The first set of filters is by collection or record type. You can see I can look and see any kind of record that Ancestry.com has online. So for today's purposes, I'm going to click on birth, marriage, and death. And what you may not have noticed here is that it took that large collection of databases, and now I'm just looking at just databases for birth, marriage, and death records. I can narrow that even further by clicking on marriage, and again you'll see this number drops because now I'm just looking at marriage records. I can then filter by location. So I have a lot of location or localities available here to choose from. For today's purposes, let's just go to the US. We can look at a couple others if we have some time. I'm going to click on Arkansas, and you can see now that I am down to 148 databases that contain some kind of a marriage record, and also in that database Arkansas is somehow mentioned. So it's a little bit of a loose filter, but I think it gets you to where you want to go. There are 2 additional filters. I'm not going to use them right now, but they may be beneficial for you. I can further filter by specific county. The reason I would argue against that is because a lot of times we roll things into a state level, or we receive things from a state archive or library, and they've already compressed all of that information into one collection. And so if I were to click on Jefferson County, I would only get a collection, a single collection, that's what this one here means, a single collection of records that was specific to that county. I can also filter by a time period. You can do it by century. You can notice that each one of these is a clickable link, or by decade. So, for example, you know that you're looking for marriage records specifically in the 1870s. You can click on that decade and see what databases contain records for that time period. And you'll notice here that the top database that comes up is Arkansas County Marriages Index from 1837 to 1957. Now, this list will always, the default is to always sort by popularity. I can change that, and I can sort this by database title, which actually puts things in alphabetical order. And you can see then here my Arkansas marriages show up right here in kind of a clump. They all start with the word Arkansas and then the word marriages, and they're in separate databases. And here's why that is. I get asked this question a lot. Why not just take all 4 of these databases of Arkansas marriages and create one searchable database? Well, the reason is Ancestry.com received these databases or these records from different providers. So we may have received one from the state health department who keeps those marriage records. We may have received one from the state library who had a collection of microfilm. So there will be some overlap. Some of you may find your ancestor in more than one of these databases. But we need to know, and you as a genealogist need to know the source of that information, especially in the case of these indexes. And we'll look at that here. Let me open one of those. I'm also going to open one of these because I want to explain something. So when you find a database that you're interested in, then go ahead and just click on that, and you'll see it takes you to a search form for that specific database. So I'm here looking at Arkansas marriages for 1851 to 1900. I can come in here and I can just start searching, but I would actually strongly encourage that you scroll past that search box, and there is a little something you're going to discover if you haven't already. Below the search box on every one of our databases, we have what's called a database description, where we actually tell you exactly what is included in that database and where we received it from. So in this case, this database was created by a private researcher. Back in 2001, he provided it to us, and the original data is actually included in this database description. So here, for example, he says Ashley County was formed in 1848 from these other counties. The records in this database don't start, however, until 1851. So even though Ashley County was formed in 1848, their marriages didn't start, the record of the marriages doesn't start until 1851. And the original data was compiled by this gentleman from county courthouse records in this town, and he's created this database from extracting those marriage records. So you can see here, I can look down here and I can see the county that I'm interested in, which of course, if you've spent any time with me, you know I'm related to most of Carroll County, Arkansas, and some of them multiple times. And Carroll County, Arkansas was formed in 1833. But the records in this database don't start until 1869. So if I was looking for a marriage record for my great-great-grandparents in the 1850s or the early 1860s in Carroll County, I'm not going to find it in this database. So even though, I hope that makes sense. Let me just pause for a moment and make sure you understand what I'm talking about. This database is Arkansas marriages that start in 1851. But the database description explains to me that for the county that I'm interested in, the records don't start until 1869. So yes, there are records like Ashley County here that start in 1851, and this is broad coverage for the whole state. But for the county that I'm interested in, they don't start until 1869. And that's really important to know, because if I had just said, oh look, Arkansas marriages that start in 1851, and I had come in here and I had started searching for my ancestors, I would have probably been very frustrated because I wouldn't have been able to find what I was looking for. However, and if you've seen me speak, you know I use this example a lot because I love it. I can still search this database, and I would encourage you to do that. My great-great-grandparents' marriage may not be recorded in this database because the records don't start early enough. However, they very likely have family members who do. So one of the things that I'll do a lot of times when I find a database of interest, I will search for the family name and in this case, I entered the marriage county, and I marked that exact. If you're not familiar with how those search filters work, anytime you type something in a location field, you can click this little link right underneath that, and you can change it to only show you that place. And it's a really great way to use those search filters. So now, instead of doing a global search on billions of records and getting billions of search results, when I do a search in this one database of Arkansas records for this one surname in this one county, I get 16 search results. And looking at this list, I can tell you I'm related to every one of these people. There is something else I want to point out here, and this is really important. If I had gone looking for my uncle Jack Lawrence and his wife Aunt Matt, who nobody knew her last name, and I was looking for a marriage record for them, I probably would not have found it any other way than doing what I just did. And here's why. You'll notice here, they're both recorded with their initials. Uncle Jack is actually Andrew Jackson Lawrence, and Aunt Matt is actually Martha Frances Bradley. You'll notice there are several others of the cousins and aunts and uncles here on this page that are listed with just their initials. And so the way that search works on Ancestry.com, if you had searched with a name, we would have given you everybody with a name at the top of the list, and then way down at the bottom of the list would have been all those people with initials only. And so, and that's just the way that the way we weight information when you do a search. And so by coming here and doing this one search in this one database, I was able to find these records immediately, even though they're recorded with just their initials. So keep that in mind when you're looking for any kind of marriage record. Read the database description. If it has what you want, great. If it doesn't, or if it's kind of close, still do a search and see what records surface that might be for other family members, cousins, aunts and uncles, brothers and sisters of your ancestors. A lot of times you'll find information about your ancestors in some of those records. Now, we're going to talk on Thursday about marriage indexes in particular, but here's just another database. This database has a little bit broader coverage, a little earlier, a little later. Again, I'm going to scroll down and read this database description to figure out where this information came from and see if there's any additional information. Let's just come back here to the card catalog. I'm going to reset some of these filters. I'm just going to click an X out of them and take myself back up to the marriage and divorce. So I'm just back into just marriage records for the whole world. We're going to look at a couple of other databases just to give you a feel for how this works. If you're not aware right now, Ancestry.com is actually running, if you're watching this live or within a day or two of the recording of this, Ancestry.com is running a free promotion for marriage records. It starts today for those of you who are subscribers, and it starts tomorrow for those of you who are not subscribers. If you are a U.S. only, like if you only have a subscription to U.S.-based records, starting today you now have access to marriage records from anywhere in the world. And so one of the things that I would encourage you to do, again, come into the card catalog, click on Europe, for example, see what records Ancestry.com has available for your location. If your ancestors are from Ireland or if they're from the United Kingdom, you can come in here and you can say, I'm interested in English marriage records. Specifically, and England is where you're going to maybe want to drill down by county. If you aren't familiar with English law, English marriage records they started recording English marriage records at a government level in 1837. So if your ancestor was married in 1837 or later, then you could come in here and you could look at those particular marriage indexes, 1837 to 1915, and then this one is 1915 to 2005. Obviously no issues with privacy there. So you'll see this database here, 32 million records, almost 33 million. This database, close to 64 million records. And that's just in these two databases from 1837 to 2005 for England. Now, if your ancestor was also married in a church, for example, maybe in London, there might also be a record of their a religious record of their marriage. So not only would there be a civil record of their marriage filed with the government, but there might also be a religious record or a parish record listing their marriage. So sometimes you have to check multiple databases, and I would encourage you to do that for a couple of reasons. One is sometimes a parish record might provide additional information, such as witnesses and information about the church that they were married in, which leads you to information about where they may have in the succeeding years christened their children. A civil record, particularly in England, is going to record stuff like the age of the bride and groom, the father's names of each of the bride and groom, and their occupation. So it leads you to another generation. So just because you found a marriage date, don't just stop there. Recognize that in England in particular, civil registration or government registration of marriages started in 1837, but they may still have also had that marriage recorded in a parish. Now, of course, before 1837, parish records are going to be one of the only places you're going to find marriage records in England. And so you'll see here this particular marriage or London parish records database starts in 1754. We have some that date back, in this case, 1538. Marriage records in England are beautiful. Sometimes a little difficult to read, but they're beautiful records to get access to, because they go so deep, and oftentimes families didn't move, and you'll see people married and christened and buried all in the same church. And so this is one of those places I started to say earlier where it's not a bad idea to filter by location. If you know, for example, that your family came from Derby, then filter directly to that county and see what's available. You're still going to have the government countrywide databases show up on your list, but then you're also going to have parish records for that specific location that might give you further information, and in this case back into the 1500s. So again, if you are a US Ancestry.com US subscriber who only has a US subscription, you now have access to worldwide marriage records starting today, and today is April 16th of 2013. For those of you who are watching this archived, you have access to those records for free today for the next several days, and for those of you who are not subscribers, you have access to worldwide marriage records starting tomorrow. Again, that's for free. But I would strongly encourage you to become very familiar with the card catalog so that you don't spend too much time doing global searches, but that you come directly to the database that you are interested in and see if we have the records. Remember, records don't exist for all marriages. Not all marriage records that exist are available online, and certainly not all records that exist online for your ancestor are going to show up as a shaky leaf hint. So take a look at the card catalog to see what's available. Check that database description to find out if what you're looking for specifically will be in that database, and then search away. Don't forget to look for some of those collateral relatives, because they may just provide you with the clues you need to break through your own genealogy brick walls. Until next time, this is Crista Cowan. Have fun climbing your family tree.